So, like I said, we are going to do the narrate your story workshop this morning. Narrating your story is really about how to tell your career story and brand yourself in your job search. I think you guys probably picked up in the previous workshops yesterday that I really like to steal concepts from other areas that I know work. I talk about when you're trying to write something well, looking at how journalists do upside down triangles. I talk about kind of taking concepts from sales and marketing that really work on the job search front too. And a lot of what we're going to talk about early this morning has to do with that. It has to do with the kind of concepts of marketing and sales in relation to how you sell yourself. So, um, talking a little bit about brands, when you look at the brands on this page, it's obvious to us when we see them, right? You probably have specific memories about each of these. When I see the golden arches, I think ba da ba ba ba, right? And Apple with the crazy music commercials and Starbucks on every corner, just do it. All of these brands, just by seeing their logo, elicit a response. And while we're not McDonald's, and we probably will never elicit that kind of 6 billion served kind of response, it is good and it is great if when someone looks at your LinkedIn profile, someone looks at a cover letter and sort of instantly recognizes who you are and what you stand for. This isn't just for job search, though. This should carry on throughout your career as you take new careers, as you progress in the same company. Good morning, Jessica. So this is a quote from Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos said that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And like or dislike the man, incredibly successful. And I think that it's a really profound quote. What people say about you when you're not in the room, right? Your personal brand is your unique background and combination of skills that makes you different. And I'm going to tell you right now that whether you think you have a brand or not, you do. And if you are thinking you don't have a brand, it's incredibly important to start cultivating that brand because if you are not the one in charge of it, then the people around you are the ones making that brand for you. So, why do you need this? For a few reasons, right? It allows you to more easily market yourself. Um, I think I am known in my department now as the guy who can solve problems. If there's a problem, then people are going to come and say, "Hey, let's get him in the room. Let's talk about it." Right? It sets you apart from riffraff and competition, and it shows you that you know who you are and what you want, which is really important. Branding differentiates you so that you're not just a generic candidate. It tells people right away who you are, what you can do. They don't have to read between the lines. It's like we talked about with your resume being just really tailored down to exactly what folks are looking for, right? Um, it positions you as a high value hire.
So let's take a step back for a second and think about what we need to do before you actually define that brand. There's a few things that I want you guys to think about before putting together what you want your brand to look like and how you want to present yourself. And the first would be to know what you want. So, like we talked about yesterday, thinking back to our roadmap and nailing down that target is identifying your target roles. You want to have that in mind before defining what that brand is going to look like for you. And from what we talked about, in that workshop, we want you to be thinking about your values, your future career goals, and what you really want your life and career to look like, so that you can focus your search and your brand. Once you have that down, we want you to think about what you bring. So you want to identify, some of these key skills and achievements So much of your brand is really about marketing yourself. And you can't market yourself if you don't know what you're selling. So I want you to think about, what are the goals and objectives of your target companies or the roles that you're targeting? And then what have you done that shows that you can help the company meet those goals? And which of your skills and accomplishments are going to be the most desirable to that target company? So that way you can help to package your brand around those skills that's going to be most desirable to them.
So I want to talk a little bit about a concept that companies use a lot when they start thinking about their products. Because I want to get you guys into the mindset of your skills and the things that you can bring to a job is your product. It's the product that you're able to put on offer. So this is an exercise that companies will go through as they try to determine how to market their product and how to sell it. And it's called the unique selling proposition. And we've changed it a bit to make it match a little bit more with a person rather than a product. So your unique selling position kind of is three different pieces that come together. If you notice, this is a little bit like Ikigai, which I like that there's a little bit of synergy there because it makes it easier to start understanding right away. The three pieces of your unique selling proposition are what the company wants, what's different about you, and what you're great at. When you can start putting those things together, it's really easy to tell, sorts of things that you could offer to folks. This can also help you if you are going back and forth on that clarity piece. We've had clients in the past who really think they know what they want, and we're like, great, let's go. And we start moving in. They get a few weeks into applying for jobs, which means that they've done a lot more research. They've applied for a lot more positions. They've read a lot more job advertisements. And they start thinking, oh, actually, I don't think I would like this job anymore. And so we take a step back, right? And we start thinking about, well, what is your unique selling proposition? What is the thing that you're really good at? And maybe that's a way that we can start bringing it in. An example, maybe if the company wants someone skilled in recruiting and you're great at identifying talent, what's different about your approach? Do you have a more compassionate approach? Do you feel that you have a unique edge in the way that you look for something? Or maybe you're going for a sales coordinator and they're looking for someone who can help with sales strategies and bringing people together. And you are good at both of those things. But what makes you uh, different than those other candidates? Because there are probably a lot of other candidates who are good at those things. I mean, that's why they're applying for the position. Maybe the sales job is in an ed tech company. You're a former teacher who really understands the target audience. That's your key differentiator, right? That's the thing that's different about you. Lots of people could be good at sales, but you understand their audience. What's different about you in this section can be very, very different, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be experience based. It can be the passion that you bring to the role. It could be that you've worked in a lot of different roles, that you have an interesting or unique skill set or background. It can be a lot of different things. So I want you guys to start thinking a little bit about these things. As you look at a job advertisement, you'll see what the company wants, and you internally at least know some of the things that you are great at. It may take a little bit more deep diving to think about that, and then start thinking about what makes you different than the other people who are looking at that job advertisement with you.
And I see some good examples in the chat from a couple of you guys that have started thinking about how to put that brand together, thinking about positioning yourself as an expert on learning and really breaking that knowledge transfer down, or, being the go-to person for, creating projects and building relationships. And so I think that those are good, pieces that you guys have kind of developed to get started in thinking about that as you think about putting these pieces together. So, what we want to take a look at next is putting together your brand statement. This is really practically how are you going to define that brand. The statement is going to be something that you could use to concisely tell someone what's different about you to make you more memorable as a candidate. So it's something that you could use as your LinkedIn headline, also to make yourself more memorable in interviews, maybe as like an email signature sign off. We've seen folks also put it on their resume, like right underneath their name before you get to the professional summary, where you have just a concise brand statement up there. So we can take a look at a couple of things about what that's going to look like. So we want you to think about your personal brand statement in light of the target and the unique selling proposition that we just looked at. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. There's really a lot of different ways that you could piece together a brand statement, but we have given you a couple of formulas to make it easier to put one together if you don't have one already. So you could do something like your job title or industry, and then what you specialize in. And we're going to take a look at some examples of what this looks like. You can also use in that job title or industry aspiring if you're transitioning to a different section. You could use your job title and then what you're passionate about or on a mission to, trying to speak to that passion piece if that's really something that differentiates you in your space. And then you could also use like I help blank to do blank. So ours, for example, is that we help educators and mission-driven professionals to make a career change. This one is a little bit trickier when you're making a career change. It tends to be more for entrepreneurial roles or even like sales type of roles where you're talking specifically to a target audience. So breaking down a couple of these examples, we see a lot of folks with pretty generic LinkedIn headlines, and they'll, say something like, transitioning teacher or open to new opportunities, seeking a new position, but it doesn't really give me a good sense or idea of what's different about you, what you bring, and why the recruiter or hiring manager would want to look at your profile a little bit more. So, if you are, for example, looking in customer success and you really have a knack for, building those relationships and, bringing people together, you could, say something like aspiring customer success specialist skilled in building meaningful relationships. Or instead of, something generic about seeking a position in HR, we have this one about aspiring HR professional, passionate about improving diversity and inclusion in the workplace. This came from a client that we worked with who, DEI was really a core pillar and value for her. And she was looking at companies where that was going to be a key component of what she would be doing within HR. And so speaking to that was really important for her to incorporate in her brand. And then she also incorporated a couple of things on her LinkedIn profile, like in her banner and in her about section, where she really drove home that passion for diversity and inclusion and how it had affected her personally. So kind of bringing together that brand. The business development representative one came from a teacher who transitioned into ed tech, and business development representative was her new title. But that doesn't really give you a sense of what she does. I think a lot of people, especially when you're not in that space, wouldn't really know what that means. So the new brand statement that she came up with, I help school administrators and instructional leaders to solve problems and improve education, was one that she could use in that new role to give her target audience a good understanding of what she does now. And then this last one came from someone that we worked with who was a radiology technician, and she was transitioning into a health tech company. And she came up with a statement about clinical professional, passionate about process improvement, employee development, and personal wellness, because those were some of the core areas that she was looking at that she felt like she could speak to, and made a transition into an industry where she was able to improve processes and use her healthcare experience. So these headlines do a better job of piquing someone's interest and intrigue. Really, you just want them to, when they're looking at your LinkedIn profile, grab their attention to get them to start reading further. So that's going to be the start of defining that brand concisely. So you could use these for your tagline, for your LinkedIn headline, talk about it in your interviews to really remind them of what you're about. So let us know in the chat if you have any questions or what you guys think about these.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the idea behind the getting your brand statement on your LinkedIn profile, I want to do say to y'all that it is iterative, right? Yeah, I think one thing that I have found with LinkedIn is that it is really important to sort of change as you go along, right? So, a lot of you all now are kind of into your job search, likely have something about being an educator. You may even now be willing to say that you're a transitioning educator. As you start getting a little bit of information about what you are targeting, then you can start putting in your target in your brand statement, start building out that brand. As we go into talking about networking a little bit more, then you'll see that's one of the few things that you see on a person's profile when you haven't actually gone to their profile. You see their headshot and you see a bit of their brand statement, right? So it can be a really good way. There are folks that I see on LinkedIn all the time that are, and I'm not suggesting that you be like one of those sort of like influencer types, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about LinkedIn and whether that actually matters or not. But for those folks who are in that path and are content creators and that sort of thing, there are folks with really memorable brand statements out there that I've seen, and it is something that kind of sticks with them. So, in transitioning from just that one piece of your LinkedIn profile, I want to talk a little bit about your LinkedIn profile in general and what should be there. So, um, your LinkedIn presence is essential for job searching right now. Employers are looking you up. They're looking you up on Facebook too, by the way. Every time I interview someone, I try to see if they have a Facebook. So like private is great. But LinkedIn is a place where you should celebrate a potential employer looking you up. And if you aren't doing that yet, it probably means that your LinkedIn needs some work, right? And um, now, some of the things that we'll talk about here, the places where you need to work, I'm not going to tell you to go get 500 friends and all of these sorts of things. We're going to focus on the things that I actually think matter to an employer. James, we're going to talk about that actually. We'll talk about posting and engaging and that sort of thing a bit because I do think that that's a place where there's a lot of opinions out there, and I certainly have my own. Um, so, in looking at your profile, what I will recommend for you to do is make your profile look like the industry that you want to work in, not the one you're leaving. So, if right now, when you look at your profile, and a lot of you who are live today are educators or former educators, some folks who may be watching later may be in very different places. But what I would say about that is if your LinkedIn profile screams the job you're doing now and you are certainly transitioning, then it's time to start looking at other folks' profiles that are in the area. If you're looking at moving into project management, for example, start finding some peer level project managers. See what kinds of things they're putting on their LinkedIn, see what things they are posting and engaging in, and start kind of mimicking that so that when folks go to your profile, they see you in that area. So your LinkedIn profile should have a headshot. Um, Headshots are valuable. It puts a name to a face. We talked yesterday about not putting your headshot on your resume, but this is a really good place to sort of put a name to a face to the brand. And when you're doing a headshot, I recommend having one without a distracting background. These are examples of ones for Rebecca and I. That's actually not what I'm using currently for my background, but it is one that kind of matches the mold. The background is not distracting. If you don't have a good headshot that has a non-distracting background, you can always throw it in Canva for free. Get a license for Canva.com, the free version, and use the background remover, and then just put a colored background in there. So we took these ourselves, and it is definitely something that you can do. I did use like a lensed camera because that's something that I have and I do, but Cell phones now are very good. Cell phones now typically can get that kind of blurry background version. Like if you've got an iPhone or a newer Android, you can use portrait mode, follow the instructions on the phone. It will get you a nice clear you and a nice blurry background. Um, on this section is another place where you can make a decision point, and that decision point is, are you willing to have the open to work sign on your profile? So we get asked this question a lot. So I suppose that question might come from you all. So I'm going to go ahead and answer it. A lot of clients want to know, should I have open to work turned on? And the answer is complicated. And so I want you to kind of think about whether the answer is yes or no for you. The reason why I say it's complicated is I don't feel there are some folks out there that say that it looks desperate. I think that's crap. If you are open to work, that's great. I don't think that you need to worry about people being like, oh, they're desperate for a job. The place where I worry about using open to work is if you've got a very active community from your current job and they don't know a lot about what you're doing yet. You can limit visibility to open to work. So when you go to turn on open to work, you can limit visibility to only recruiters, and LinkedIn will do its best to not show recruiters from your agency that those postings, but it can't guarantee. And if you work at like a multi-tiered kind of place that has multiple profiles on LinkedIn, occasionally things can slip out. Rebecca's organization, for example, is kind of like a nested organization. There's an overall um, organization, and then the organization she works for is literally just 20 people, and they're just administratively housed there. Well, they have their own um, LinkedIn, and so if she were to put on open to work, we wouldn't have high hopes that people from the parent organization wouldn't see it, because why would LinkedIn know that those two things are related? So you need to think about that a little bit. And if you are open to work, if you know you're not going to be treated poorly at your current organization, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to let folks know.
Yeah, and then the other thing on the open to work that I would say is, it will allow you to set which job titles that you are open to looking at. So you want to think about that strategically. I believe it'll let you select up to 5 now on LinkedIn. But we have seen folks that have they're open to work and they have 5 different job titles that are completely different. And when you do that, it doesn't give recruiters or hiring managers who are looking at you a good sense of what you want to do, because it feels a little scattered. You don't seem very focused. So it's not a bad thing to have multiple titles on there. You can have 3 4 titles, but I would say think about again what that target is and make sure that they are in a related space. So if you're looking at multiple different job titles within the same type of industry, and you have those different job titles listed, that's okay. But if you have 5 different job titles that you're not really sure and you're just kind of listing all of them and you're open to work, that doesn't set as good of a presence on your brand as far as what you're looking for, that you kind of know what you want.
Yeah, exactly. I think about for myself, if I were in the job search bucket in terms of non self employment like we do now, I'm in organizational development, right? But that can be named so many different things in so many different places. So I would start doing research. I might put organizational development director as one. I might put performance management director, director of training and development, because all of these things could theoretically be the same job. And so using that, because one thing, and I didn't know this going in, when a recruiter goes to your profile through keywords, they don't just see the one that brought them there. So when they are looking for a communication specialist and they find you that way, when they go to find out the other things that you do, they can see all 5 of them. And so that if they think that like, wow, this person doesn't know what they want to do, that could negatively impact you.
Yeah, I actually even saw someone posting on LinkedIn not too long ago, and they had said that they were asked in an interview, because the person had looked at their LinkedIn profile and they had like 3 different job titles on their open to work. The interviewer actually asked them, "Can you tell us about these 3 different job titles that we saw that you're looking at and why you're looking in each of these areas?" So they are paying attention to those. So I would just make sure that you're being intentional and strategic about that.
For sure. There is a very spirited conversation in the chat right now about people's headlines.
Yes,
So
often changing. So yeah, I think that hopefully this helps you guys to narrow it down a little bit further.
so let's talk a little bit about your about section. I will tell you from things that I've heard from recruiters, the farther down the LinkedIn profile we go, the less folks are likely to see it. And I do believe that that's true. I mean, it's the same as with a resume. We often talk about the top third of your resume is really the moneymaker. It's the thing that likely someone is going to look at more than once, while the rest of it they may only look at once. The about section is sort of, at the tail end of the thing that I think most people are looking at. So it is a section that I think is really important for you to complete. It does multiple things. First of all, it is a place for you to tell your story and the impact you've made. This is the place, we talked yesterday um, about I language and that sort of thing. And on the resume, we typically don't use it. We do sometimes. It kind of depends on the industry, but typically we would say um, that it's just filler words and you can actually shorten your resume by making sentence fragments. This is a place where I would use a lot of I language because the about section really is about you. Um, it is a way to shore up more keywords. So on your about section, if there are things that you've done that you're often seeing in job advertisements in the industry you're looking for, if someone's talking about analyzing data in every single job ad, I would recommend in your about section talking about analyzing data. Because if you're searched if a recruiter searches you, that's a way that they might find you. This isn't a place that really needs to repeat your resume. I think that your resume is a great standalone document. It's the same thing that we would say about your cover letter. Your cover letter shouldn't basically just run through the entire resume. It should be a very specific piece to kind of talk a little bit more in long form about where you're at. I'm seeing some folks talking about needing to work on their about section. James, I'm curious to know on yours, you say that you may have too much in there. It's possible that you do. We do like a relatively long about section. I think in the same way that I would tell you to do anything else is expect that someone may read the first paragraph. And if they like you, they may read a little more. And if they really like you, they may read a little more. But it doesn't hurt that there's a decent amount there. The place that I will say is you just want to make sure that it's relevant to what you're doing now. So if you find that you have a lot in there and it's not super relevant, then that's where I would start going.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
more that you have in there, the more keywords that you can be found from. So there's a couple different ways that folks can search, that recruiters can search and find you. They can find you using keywords from your about section, from your headline, and then also from your skills section. So having a lot of those, words in there that are going to be in the types of job advertisements that you're looking at can be really helpful. If it is a longer about section, using white space to break it up and having things in like shorter, like a sentence or two, and then some white space will make it a lot easier on the eyes, or having almost more of like a bullet, not resume bullets, but different types of pieces that you want to talk about, and breaking it up will help, because you do want to avoid kind of long paragraph type structure so that it's easy for people to skim through.
Yeah, we've got a lot of folks who are here live today who are English nerds. And so I'm going to tell you what was difficult for me because I know it will be difficult for you. LinkedIn doesn't allow you to format anything. So you can't use rich text. You can't use bullets, italics, that sort of thing. And so it can be a little bit difficult to make things not look like a wall of text. So what you're going to need to do, and the thing that was difficult for me to get used to, is you're not going for that 5 to 8 sentence paragraph typically in LinkedIn, whether it's in a post or in your about section. If any of you all are following me, you're going to see that most of my posts are 1 or 2 sentences, a white space break, 1 or 2 sentences, a white space break. You're going to do kind of something similar in your about section. rather than having 5 to 8 sections, it may be 2 to 3 to maybe 4 if they're short sections with white space in between. It just makes it easier to read. And I see that there is a question in the chat about tone of that section: laid back, super professional, other. Um, so I'm going to say this is again one of those things that it depends, and it depends a little bit on the kind of place that you're trying to go into. So I'm in training and development. I work for government, which government is pretty stodgy. And if I were in another area of government, say I was in HR, say I was in procurement, one of these kind of things, or I was if I was looking at a lot of Fortune 500 companies that are very well established, I might be a little more stodgy in my language. I might be a little bit more traditional and professional. But because I'm in training and development and they expect me to be a weirdo anyway, I let my freak flag fly and I have emojis and I talk about things casually. I try to make jokes. But that's kind of a me thing. And so, what I would say to you if you're trying to figure out the tone of that section is twofold. Think about the industry you want to enter and the profession you want to go into in that industry. That will be one part of it. And then think about your brand. What is your brand? Because that's another part of branding is, are you the person that is a little bit more I wear Hawaiian shirts on to the business office, right? Because if that is your brand, it's kind of my brand, then you're going to want to be a little bit more laid back. But if your brand is I want to be the consummate professional and I want everyone to see that immediately when they look at me, then that's your brand, and I would let your writing dictate that as well.
Yeah, I would say both of us have a more casual tone on our about sections. So even though I am in my day job in the finance industry, which tends to be a little bit more of an uptight space, especially in government, I do still have emojis in my about section. I think it starts off like, "Hey, I'm Rebecca," and it's a little bit more casual. I would use first person in that section. I see quite a few folks, whose section starts out with like experienced professional in blank or a driven self-starter, and it sounds more like a resume or a professional summary than it does like I'm reading a document from you. So I would personalize it and make it you can make it a little bit fun. I would avoid using like jargon or things that people see a lot on their self-starter and some of those like buzzwords that are really overused.
It sounds like the about section might be something that we are talking about in group coaching this afternoon, and I'm here for it. So let's quickly go through other sections that you're likely going to want to complete. Your banner. So the LinkedIn banner, it is by and large not used by folks. I think I see a banner every 4 or 5, 6 profiles that I look at. I do think it's really nice to not have that default gray banner. You don't really need to overthink this. I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday when we were in our happy hour after the event, but my banner is much more business focused. It's got our mission statement, it's got a picture of us, it's got our brand colors. It's very heavily branded. I don't expect that you guys would have that. I don't expect that y'all would do that. Rebecca's is probably much more like what I would expect, a job seeker to have. It's, a nature photo because she liked the photo. It's a quote. Um, we've had clients who are from the Bay Area, for example, and love the bridge, and so they take a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's the photo. Don't overthink it, but it is nice to just break up that gray space. We talked about the headline. Yeah, the took a Brooklyn skyline at sunset. Yeah, exactly. I think that that's great. I mean, again, not overthinking, just really kind of using what you've got that fits in with you and your personality. Um, we've got your headline. We've talked ad nauseum about that. Use that brand statement. Um, if you are putting in experience, so you've got your work history, just be consistent with your resume. That's not necessarily going to say it's going to have everything your resume is like on it, because your LinkedIn is going to be more general than your resumes that you're tailoring each time. but you don't want it to be contradictory. You don't want it to look like it's completely different.
Yeah, and quick tip on that, because if you do find that maybe there's a couple of recent jobs that aren't updated on your LinkedIn section and you need to update your experience section, there is a way to turn off updates so that it's not notifying everyone in your network. Because we've seen that happen to some folks where you go in to update your experience section later and then it notifies everyone you started a new job, but it's something from the past and you're just updating that section so you can turn off those updates so that it doesn't notify people if you're editing that for consistency.
Yep, for sure. And so, moving on, education. Education is a great place to put in. LinkedIn gives you the opportunity to put one job and one education piece as little icons at the top of your profile. And so, if you've got multiple degrees, you can kind of choose which one. If you've got multiple jobs, you can choose which one. I use Send It as our as mine, and then I use University of Oklahoma as mine as well. So you can kind of choose what goes up there. Your skills section. So chances are that folks will only see the three skills that show up on your main profile because you have to actually click in to look at more. The skills section is incredibly useful. Excuse me. Because those are just more keywords that will be able to be searchable by recruiters. But what I would suggest for you to do is really, really make sure that the top three skills are skills that you really want folks to see. All the other skills that are in there are really for keyword optimization. And you can have up to 50, you don't need 50. Put the ones that really are relevant, and then you can reorder skills and drag to the top the three that you want people to think about when they see you. Licenses and certifications are another piece. If you've got licenses and certifications, put them in there. If they are relevant to your job search, that'll be helpful. If it's just background, we mentioned her earlier, but we have a client who was in radiology and wanted to move into an office space kind of job because she was tired of that frontline draining work. But she wanted to really show off her clinical side because a lot of the office jobs she was looking at were jobs that worked on the outside of clinical work. So they were like med tech and that sort of thing. And so she wanted to really show off the fact that she had that certification so that she could say, look, I know your clientele better than anyone that is applying for this job. So that was a good place for her to really be able to do that. Talking about just a few other LinkedIn tips. You can personalize the URL if you don't know that already. The URL on your LinkedIn right now is like linkedin.com/ln/a million things. You can go in and put in your name. Chances are, if you've got a relatively common name, like my name was taken, but I was able to put Michael Livingston MPA. So I put my designation from my master's degree in there. I think Rebecca's is Rebecca Livingston Coaching. So coming up with a way to put that in there. The nice thing if you do that, A, it shows that you're paying attention. B, it's easier to share that with somebody. I know we're not really in that old school method of handing out business cards, although I work in a profession where that still happens. If I wanted to have a business card that had my LinkedIn profile, it is nice that it's much easier to read because they can't, it's a physical it's a physical item, so they can't like click it like they would online.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. And I would avoid having any sort of, spaces or special characters or anything like that in your URL if you customize the URL, just so it's easier for people to search for. And then definitely make sure once you have that URL updated that you link it on your resume. So we have the instructions for where to do that. I believe you can still only do it from desktop, but you can just edit your profile and then edit public profile and then URL.
Yeah, and then there is a featured section that is often used on LinkedIn by creators. So I'm a creator in LinkedIn. I have changed my profile to a creator mode. But anyone has access to the featured section. It's just in a different place. Mine is higher up. I use my featured section because I am a creator to feature things that we're working on. So boot camp, when we decided that we were going to offer this out for free to folks, we featured that in our section. The free things that I give out to folks who need some help, they're always featured in my featured section. For those of you who are not running a business, a featured section still can be really useful. So think about, like, if you are looking to move into learning and development, especially on the instructional design side of things, having a portfolio that's really easy to access is great for your job search. So have a portfolio that you house online and put it in your featured section so that folks can get to it really easily. Um, if you have kind of projects that you've built before, put those in your featured section. Or if you have a website that you run, put that in your featured section so that folks can get to it. If you run a blog, that sort of thing, as long as you're okay with people knowing about it. If you run a blog that's a little questionable that you don't want folks to know about, obviously don't feature. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice today. Your activity, and this talks a little bit about what James had mentioned about how much should he be interacting and that sort of thing. And so we can talk a little bit about that here, but we'll talk more as we go when we talk about networking. But your activity section is visible to everyone. People can see if you are commenting on things. People can see if you're liking things. I want you, if you are doing that, to really be adding value. And what I mean by that is it's great to reshare things from the industry. So I will often see training and development quotes or training and development articles, and I'll post those. Or for you all, if I see a job that I think a lot of people who follow me would like, I'll repost that. I comment a lot on things, and I make posts a lot more than I would expect you all to. One of the things that we tell our folks is that you really need to know your audience when you're on LinkedIn. And often, I think because people think of LinkedIn as social media, which it is, they don't think of their audience necessarily in the same way, because in most social media, your audience are your peers. But in this particular market, your audience really is people who can give you a job, people who are experts in the field. And so when I think about how much you should comment, how much you should post, that sort of thing, I think a little bit more about thinking about it from a perspective of, does this bring value to potential employers, rather than is this a way to get friends and followers and that sort of thing as a job seeker. It's a little bit different if you were more on that influencer side.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would also say, on the activity to, James's question, you do get more visibility first off on LinkedIn if you are active. So, making sure that you have a presence on there and have some activity is definitely valuable. I would think about when you're posting who your target audience is. So, in light of when you are posting, if you are a transitioning, teacher, other teachers, while it may be, valuable to post things for them, are not necessarily your target audience when you are a job seeker. Your target audience is going to be recruiters, hiring managers, those that you are looking to hire you. And so I would think about, more content if you are posting that's going to add value, so that if they stumble upon your profile, they're going to say, oh, wow, this person really knows this industry. Maybe they really understand, learning and development, whether that's sharing articles or sharing, new ideas, or saying, hey, I came across this and here's my 2 cents on it, and kind of adding some of that value like Michael was talking about.
Casey mentioned, would it be helpful for those of us in this session to endorse one another or recommend one another? For me, the way that I think about endorsements and recommendations, I think they're really important. They do, however, get gamed a lot. So I will tell you that a lot of folks who are hiring don't pay that much attention. Like if someone has 75 endorsements for something, likely they were going through and they were doing, like, there are a lot of kind of engagement posts on LinkedIn where people are like, post on here what you're good at and we'll endorse you. I don't really like to be involved in that sort of thing, because I don't necessarily think that it's relevant or useful or even ethical necessarily, right? When you get to that part where it's like a bunch of strangers endorsing a bunch of strangers. That's not what I'm saying that you're asking about, Casey. But when you see that sort of thing, that makes me nervous. I think that I think recommendations are stronger than endorsements because endorsements really just take one click. You just can say someone's good at something and it happens. Recommendations, when you do it, you have to say how you know that person, and how you might have interacted with that person. And so I put a little bit more weight on those. And I do think that both are good, but I try to court them from people who I know will say something good about me and know has the ability to say that good thing about me.
Yeah, and then I saw Maria has a question about if there's maybe a best time of day to post things. So that's something that we have definitely played around with. It can be really hit or miss, especially as a job seeker. And I've seen, kind of trends on LinkedIn, especially this year with more job seekers posting and engaging. And so I do think, there is an increase in kind of the amount of noise out there. So sometimes it can be a little bit trickier. But generally, we've found kind of the like 8 a.m. window on Eastern time, 8 to 9 a.m. tends to work pretty well. Sometimes like 6 p.m. in the evening can work pretty well because folks are off work. That can also be a better time if you have like a video that you're sharing or things like that because people are actually off work so they can watch the video with the sound on. So that can be a good time to catch folks. And then, some people who are actively job seeking are on more on the weekends. So that can be a good time to engage with those folks if you're trying to build your network. So that's just kind of a couple of things that you might try. But I would say just experiment with it when you are posting to see what works best for you and your network because it's going to be different depending on the folks that you have. All right, so we're going to move into some of the other places where you can tell that career story in addition to your LinkedIn profile. So, we talked in our resume workshop about your professional summary. And this is going to be a more detailed version of your brand statement where you have that 2 3 sentences focusing on what you can do for the employer. Your interviews is also going to be a way where you can tell that story and think about that unique selling proposition again for these interviews with that Venn diagram that we looked at so that you can highlight what's unique about you when you go in to have those conversations. And then your cover letter. Some people think the cover letter is outdated, but a really great cover letter can set you apart. And we have seen it work with clients. So, a great cover letter is going to bring together your story, your passion, your excitement, and your skills. And we're going to get into that in just a minute and show some examples of those. The most important piece, I would say, for cover letters is that they are customized for each role. Those generic cover letters aren't really doing you any favors. So you want to think about that when it comes to, kind of telling that story. So let's get into what that actually looks like with cover letters. We have a 3 paragraph formula that we're going to show you that can make it a little bit easier if you struggle with writing cover letters. The best thing to do is just to practice. And we do have a template that you guys have in the shared folder. So it's broken up into 3 paragraphs and has kind of prompts for what you should be thinking about for each paragraph. We can't tell you exactly what to say because this is, your story and we want it to be a personal document, but I think that can help to get you thinking about what you should be saying at each piece. So the best way to start out a cover letter in the beginning is introduce yourself and then hook them. So you want to, tell some sort of a memorable story. We don't want to sound boring and like everyone else. I can't tell you how many cover letters, that I've seen. I think we've all been guilty of this at some point where it's, dear sir, madam, I'm writing to tell you about my interest in this role. But we want to build excitement for you as a candidate, and those sound so much like everything else that they've seen that I don't think that they really do that. So you want to tell them something that really piques their interest and excitement. Tell them why you're interested in the position. Do you share some of the same values as the company? Have you always wanted to work for that company? Is it something that is maybe a dream company of yours? In happy hour yesterday, we were talking about our client who was a teacher and really wanted to work in video games and had used the first paragraph of her cover letter to talk about how much she had enjoyed playing their games since she was young. And they actually mentioned in her interview that they really liked her cover letter. So they can get noticed, in a sense to where people are remembering them because that cover letter was memorable for them. And then you want to tie your interest to what you've done before. So we want to give them a preview of your skills here, but we're really going to dig into more quantified skills and accomplishments in that second paragraph. And then when you start out the cover letter, I would, if you can, do some research to see if you can find a name. The job title or the job ad might say a title of the person that you would be reporting to, and then you could look them up on LinkedIn. If you can't find the name, you can always put "Dear Hiring Team," just no "Dear Sir" or "Madam." All right, so this is an example of what a first paragraph might look like with a memorable story. So this is a true story from something that my boss had told me, and it says my current boss once told me that there's no one else he would feel more confident with in a trust fall exercise than me. I took that as high praise, but come to think about it, there's a reason he places so much confidence and trust in me. I've always been the person that people can go to when they need someone they can rely on. So when I saw the job for, compliance coordinator, I knew it was perfect for someone like me. So it's, giving you an example of kind of thinking about a story when you're looking at, something like a compliance role, which is a field that, I used to be in, that, trust is really important. And so this is something that like, if I start reading that cover letter as a recruiter, I would be like, why is she telling me this? And then I would want to keep reading to see, what she's going to talk about in this cover letter. For the second paragraph, we want to share relevant skills and accomplishments. And relevant is really the key here. You want to focus on what is important to them. They don't, need to know every skill you've had or every job. I would probably focus on, a few skills or accomplishments that are most relevant to the role and think about the biggest value that you would provide for them. And then be specific, like we talked about on the resume, you want to do the same thing here and use numbers or metrics to back up your accomplishments whenever you can. Like talking about you achieved X result, in your previous role, and you would love to do the same for, Y company. And then you want to bridge the gap when you're transitioning from another industry. So we want to make sure that it's clear how you align with this role and connect the dots for the recruiter on why you should be considered. So part of that is, telling them what from your last role is applicable to this one. So looking at an example of this, I could talk about, how like in an earlier role when I was kind of moving into compliance several years back in my career, I had spent the last 4 years working in social services, managing confidential client information and records, processed up to 150 cases per month. So there's, a quantified piece in there where they can see the volume, and handled a high volume of calls to assist clients in renewing benefits electronically. This position taught me how to prioritize and coordinate the completion of documents with exceptional accuracy. So again, pulling in pieces that might be important for a compliance type of role. I was required to keep up to date with state policy to ensure it was being followed appropriately. I'm skilled at working quickly under deadlines, and my cases had a 99% accuracy rating. My experience in social services has prepared me well for this role as a compliance coordinator. So that's kind of trying to bring it together to show them how my experience ties into this role. And you guys have the full cover letter examples for these in the shared files folder so that you can see them all put together, as well as a cover letter that Michael put together too, and then a couple of student examples that we've really liked from the past so that you can see a couple of examples there. And then finally, for the third paragraph, we want to just restate your excitement and then provide a call to action. For this paragraph, you can keep it brief. Doesn't need to be very long. And you don't want to have a weak call to action. You want to finish strong. You don't want to say, like, I really hope to hear from you. You want to invite them to contact you. So you could have something like, I have a passion for data and I'm known for living in the details. I would be very excited to use these skills at XYZ company. I'm available to discuss my qualifications and I look forward to hearing from you. So hopefully that helps you guys to think about how to craft a cover letter. And we have the template that you guys will see in the shared folder too, where you can just kind of think about some of those prompts of what you want to talk about at each piece.